areas and realms on the physical bottom rung level, as alien as they may initially seem, at least will be perceivable, as everything on the physical level is based on our senses. We all have the adequate equipment to decode the information in our environment into a virtual reality holographic world in our minds. The information we receive is in accordance with what we have set in motion. The created consciousness construction is the factory of perpetual generating of causes that select the information our biological computer senses will receive, and then our brains decode into our experience. We are, in essence, locked within our own consciousness, and how we have chosen to construct it, or allowed others to do so, based on agreeing to the creations of others, dictates the experience we have. We say creation is like a reflective bubble, as we produce our ideas, as we chase our thrills, and set our causes in motion, we receive the effects. It's very easy to see how people become self-convinced, as whatever they decide and choose will be their reality. An individual can effectively activate a causal experience generating effect based on the notion that if they pray to the gods, they will have good fortune. As an example, any time we are praying for anything, we are in fact asking ourselves for something, and depending on the construction of the thought dictates the outcome. Were someone to pray, but their subconscious houses emotionally charged ideas of being a failure, then this will very much affect the outcome. Effectively, you can nullify your own attempted creation by attaching an unconscious negative to the conscious desire. An individual who did not harbour such subconscious notions of failure and prays to a god for good luck may find the luck more forthcoming, and so this will confirm in their mind that God must be a reality, and has bestowed his great blessings upon them. This person now has a solid conviction of this idea in creation, the idea of a God and his magnanimous blessings. As for the individual who seemingly was shunned by the Almighty, whose prayer didn't come to pass, due to the unconscious undermining of everything they try to create, well, this individual may question if such a God exists, or may decide they have been cursed, or are a bad person in the eyes of God. Regardless of what an individual decides, all these will be self-convictions. All these will be restrictions, and if maintained, can become rigid, and add to the created personal self-consciousness. An individual can have lifetimes of dire experiences simply by deciding that they are cursed, for whatever we decide and choose, we will experience. Creation is a reflective bubble. Realistically, then, we ought seek to not be self-convinced about anything, for the moment we establish our convictions, regardless of what they are, we are adding another bar to our created consciousness prison. To look at the demonstration of the sun as our ever example of the is, we can see how it is not convinced about anything. It doesn't latch onto any notion or truth, and stand rigidly by anything. It demonstrates the isness, which is what we all are. But to be this, we must remove ourselves from the created consciousness of our created self we always have held so dear. Being self-convinced is simply deciding adamantly on something based on the evidence of our experience. But all experience is based on what we decide, what we set in motion, with cause and effect. Following through the process, we can see that anything we become convinced about is something we created for whatever reason, and maybe even unconsciously of the process by which we did. And then we walk into our creation, the experience that follows, and the specifics of it may have us forge our self-convictions. Being self-convinced is tantamount to now consciously deciding and choosing, generating idea causes based on the conviction we now have taken on board. We create our own self-confirmations of our convictions, as we simply are constantly generating the very experience that we based our conviction on initially. For the individual who is having their convictions constantly verified, because they are constantly creating the experience that does so, they will be adamant that they are correct. Everything in creation is created, and is according to the one that creates it, the various ideas that make up its design, and every experience will reflect that idea. And so it's possible that every individual in creation could potentially be self-convinced about something different. Every individual could have their own truth, and all these self-convictions, all these truths, would be reflected back onto the individual and confirm that it is so. Generally, though, most people tend to agree with each other, for fear of exploring beyond the parameters of social consciousness, the fear of not being accepted by others. Agreement to fundamentally the same ideas will have a collectively experienced baseline reality, but with room for a little individual nuance of self-conviction. Creation is a reflective bubble, the individuals within it intrinsic to its operation, for if nothing was generated, then no experiences would be had. We're all in life, and we are not just the effect of our own ideas, but of others also, as we unconsciously agree to that which makes up our collective experience. As much as creation reflects our causes back at us, we might say we live in our own self-maintained and restricted bubbles of consciousness. As our ideas are reflected back at us through cause and effect and become our experiences, we add to our created consciousness as we evaluate that which we experience and decide on the things that we do. We tend to emotionally attach to certain notions, many of which are programmed in from those that would have us agree with ideas that benefit them. We tend to have very repetitive cycles of experience based on these attachments and ideas, and what we become self-convinced about can have us the effect of through the verification process that we create. Creation is a training simulator of endless possibility. Whatever we want, we can have. We can create anything we choose. It's simply a case of deciding it, and yet we limit ourselves in the way we do, and generally lead very restricted lives. Our created consciousness always generating the same experience, or very similar, for thousands of lifetimes. We have created a very small bubble of experience within the much larger bubble of creation. In a way, we are no longer making use of the full potentiality of the simulator. Our rigid created consciousness has placed us in a very small expression of it. Our focus has been diminished over the lifetimes to the point where the masses are simply slaves, with a few perks thrown in, a few entertainments. As our created consciousness becomes compounded and solidified, generally along the lines of being controlled and enslaved, our little bubbles become very solid also, impenetrable. Our awareness is locked into our creation, within the bubble of our created consciousness, and we may rarely become aware of anything else, as the control system seeks to lock us into this model of control and servitude. Awareness is essential for our process of getting through creation and ourselves, awareness of something else beyond our current creation. Awareness of more has us then experiencing more than we have before, and we then become even more aware. We become more aware of ourselves and how we have constructed the personal vehicles, and ultimately the process would have us determine the entirety of our created selves, and the next step is the connection to our real awareness, the real you that oversees the personal self from the true reality of the is. This process is a natural progression and orchestrated by the real you. It nudges the personal self along, as it must first get through the lowest parts of its created self, the mental and emotional vehicles, the created consciousness that is effectively owned by the reptilian Callum God of the mental level plane. If this process is restricted, if a controlling force garners agreement from the masses for their own control purposes, that locks the multitudes into these very self-limiting bubbles of rigid consciousness, then awareness cannot expand, it stagnates. The controllers do not understand why the simulator is in decline, as they don't fully recognize the process by which it is based. The overall simulator is the overall experience that reflects the overall individual's consciousness. Consequently, the restriction of it will result in the simulator going through its epoch cycles, spiraling down to the inevitable conclusion of implosion and a reset. A reformulation of the simulator is then required. We can see that everything in creation is a created idea. It isn't real. All the truths we may cling to, all the contentions we have, all that we are self-convinced about, will make up our created consciousness, a created consciousness that is created, and everything that it comprises of, and has nothing to do with the true reality of the is. We can see then that any truth or self-conviction can be reinforced through the experiences that follow, as they will mirror our convictions and feed our contentions of their actuality, when in essence everything in creation, Every idea, thought, and emotion, from everything we see to everything our created self is, isn't real. It's all illusion. It is the passing dream. But it is necessary to determine and recognize what the all is, by recognizing what it isn't, and that is creation, and that is the purpose of the simulator.